This is Energy Perspectives, a weekly podcast produced in Guyana that delves into the developments unfolding in the world's fastest growing economy.
Hi there. Welcome to this week's episode of the Energy Perspectives podcast. I am your hostess, CEO of the Guyana Energy Conference and Supply Chain Expo, Kiana Wilberg. Today, we will delve into a very important topic, and that is the importance of supply chain management and optimization. Now, as many of you may already know, this is an important part of our identity as the Guyana Energy Conference. To assist us in understanding and deepening our appreciation of this topic is an expert consultant at Ernst & Young, Ms. Rae-Anne Alves. Ms. Alves, welcome to our podcast and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so I want to jump straight in. As I noted, supply chain management is a critical component of our Guyana Energy Conference identity, as the name suggests. So, Ms. Alves, I'd like to give you the floor, so to speak, to tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do at Ernst & Young, and briefly, what is supply chain and how important is it?
Yes, so just a little brief on my background. So by training, I'm a chemical engineer. So did a lot of work in a lot of different sectors and you focus on a lot of scaling. During the course of my career, even though I started in manufacturing, I wanted to broaden that depth across the supply chain. And so when I transitioned into consulting, that's where I gathered the breadth of all of end-to-end supply chain, inclusive of sustainability, as well as supply chain data and analytics. And so when it comes to how I'm supporting Ernst & Young, I'm helping Guyana build their consulting practice, and that is why I'm here before you at this point. When you think about supply chain is how you get goods and the transport of goods from the raw materials to whoever the final consumer is in whatever type of fashion. And so where it's very interesting is depending on your organization, some people use and view supply chain as maybe the logistics or the procurement. But when you think about end-to-end supply chain, it has a large component around supplier management, planning, procurement, ops, manufacturing, distribution and logistics, contract management,
Wow.
supply chain data and analytics, as well as sustainability. And so when you think about what Guyana has before it, it's trying to master all of those assets.
Wow, I think that is a really beautiful and comprehensive overview of what we're dealing with. And I want to hone in a bit on the oil and gas industry because traditionally, Guyana, our businessmen and women, they would have been dealing with supply chain management and the entire process involved from just a number of sectors. But we've seen that oil and gas is truly massive. There's a supply chain for exploration, development, and even production. So, what would it take to ensure that we have a fully integrated supply chain system that supports Guyana's success in the oil and gas industry?
So I think trying to take on too many different initiatives at once might make this more complex than it needs to be. But I think when you think about Guyana and oil and gas, there are three areas that I think would be good to kind of like focus on when you think about Guyana. So I think it's having what you call, let's say, a North Star, which is this is the direction that you want Guyana to go and when it comes to oil and gas. And so where that becomes very, very useful is as Guyana gets a lot of competing priorities and a lot of interest, as you know, what is currently happening, having that one vision that you can anchor to helps you say, okay, that is important, but it's not as important as something else, and it helps you prioritize. The second component would be around the human capital. There has been a lot of conversations around the skills, and Guyana has a lot of skills. It's just the scale and speed of which those things are needed that oil and gas is requiring. But I would say like the human capital and that people development is the second part. The third part, I do think is like the modernization or the digitization of those things. When you want to go at pace, a lot of the processes, having them be digital in some form or fashion, one allows you to reference them quickly. And then it also allows you to manipulate so that as the government and all the sectors and oil and gas are looking at information, it can be data driven because you have the data at your fingertips, for lack of a better word, and that you can use that to influence how you are managing your supply chain because you have the data that you need in order to make decisions.
So, if I understand you clearly, have as our North Star a vision of where we want to go,
Yes,
then ensure we have the capacity, the human
correct.
development to implement that vision.
Correct.
And then ensure that we're driving all of that with a digital platform.
Right.
Now, Guyana is on the cusp, and I love that you mentioned that point. Guyana is on the cusp of really transforming its digital agenda. And we're also seeing the fast paced nature of the oil and gas industry. Is it possible to still catch up and have the two work seamlessly?
So, from a Guyanese perspective, I don't know if I really like the term catch up. And here's why it would imply that you've done something wrong, right? Whereas a lot of organizations, and I've worked with multinationals across the globe, having the data and that digitization is not something that's just unique to Guyana. So when you say catch up, it's almost like something was done wrong. Guyana did what it needed to do based off of where it was. And so when you think about where it is now and what it's trying to be in the future, yes, the digitization becomes a thing, but it's not just a Guyana kind of thing. That being said, to catch up and move forward, yes, digitization can help because, again, it's getting the data. One of the really important things is with the supply chain and managing the current version or the future version is that digitization, I think, allows Guyana to do a bit of a reset. And what I mean is the country's been through a lot of things since independence, and it's, you're trying different things to kind of, as you learn and you gather your footing. But this digitization allows you to say, yes, I had all these plans for the last 60 years, but I can reset and say, what do I want to be in the future? Because when Burnham was in power, could he have contemplated what you would see right now? So to try to hold yourself to the old views versus saying, I will take that digitization to hit me as a reset, and then you move forward to what's needed.
Thank you for that. And I do appreciate that perspective. Now, I want to hone in on a point that you made in your three-pronged approach on how we're to address robust supply chain management and optimization. And that's the development of workforce. Now, how should we approach this? What skill sets are truly needed to support a vision for robust supply chain management?
Yeah, so that is a very complex question. And the reason I say that is Guyana has a workforce and they have certain capabilities, but you have a new sector that you're building on. And so what I would say is when you think about the human capital or the workforce development, one, when it comes to supply chain, that is going to be the crux, my perspective, of whether the supply chain can be successful. No matter how robust I build a supply chain, no matter how resilient I make the processes, if I don't have the people to, even if I use digital or use AI, if I don't have the people to configure and monitor and manage and ensure compliance, the supply chain still will not do what you need it to do. So with all of that said, the human capital is one of the biggest risks that is not often acknowledged. What I've seen with Guyana is it is front and center. I've heard several of the ministers, the president, everybody acknowledges that it's there. But to your specific question on what is needed, the reason I said it's not as an easy question is you need to create like little bite size. And what I'd say is the whole effort is going to be massive and it's going to take time. But if you can break down and say, all right, for this particular, let's say exploration or for production, or try to break it down into smaller pieces versus saying, well, I need to service all of oil and gas, which is growing at a massive rate. Well, that also means that I need all of the healthcare workers and I need all of this and I need all of this. It can seem daunting, but I think breaking it into smaller pieces and then just focusing on that one and then almost in an agile fashion. Once you solution, let's say, the number of engineers or the personas that you need for engineering, then you go to the next one. So that might be supervisory. What is that one? And you just kind of try to break it into smaller components that are manageable so that you can see the wins at the same time and you doesn't seem as daunting because you're making progress.
How has AI, and it's a big thing right now, how has AI really changed the game for the supply chain industry?
Yeah, so I think some of what Guyana is facing, it has a chance to use AI in a really innovative way, in that where you would have just tried to have a lot of people do a lot of the work for tasks that you know are highly repetitive, you can then use AI to train that. So you don't have to worry about, to your question prior, I don't have to worry about that particular role because I can now use AI in order to do that and inform it. So I think AI changes the game because you can now focus people's efforts on higher level things instead of like maybe some of the repetitive tasks.
Now, before we move to EY and its presence in Guyana, can you tell us a bit about what are some of the metrics we can use to measure the effectiveness of supply chain in Guyana's evolving oil and gas industry?
So it's several components because, like we talked about, supply chain is massive. But one of the things, or a few of the things you would see used is, let's say, the asset utilization. So all of the equipment is there. How often is it being used? You'll look into that. You can look at workforce productivity, and that can be done in how many barrels per person. So you can kind of just do some equations there. You can also look at, let's say, actual output and productivity, like how many barrels per day or some of that. Safety is another one because the more incidents you have, that has a domino effect. That means your workforce is impacted, then productivity is impacted. So I think those are a few of the actual metrics that'll give you an idea of how the whole thing is going across the supply chain.
Thank you for that. Now, as I noted earlier in my introduction, you are an expert consultant with Ernst & Young, one of the most reputable institutions in the world. Tell us a bit about their presence in Guyana.
Yeah, so it's been definitely a journey. So EY has been in Guyana since about 2017 with a tax, and then they added an audit presence. And so what you're seeing now is over the last several years is the addition of the consulting presence, which is what I am leading. So that way, the same kind of services and expectations that our clients see outside of Guyana in the globe, we're bringing that so that EY can have that same type of support here. So our local presence is definitely scaling, but you have the infrastructure of the global firm behind you for everything that we do here.
That's wonderful news. Now, to close, and do permit me for sharing this as well. While you are based in the U.S., you are proud. You hold proud Guyanese roots.
Yes, I do.
Okay.
So a little bit of background on me is both my parents are Guyanese, so they are proud residents at one point of Guyana. In Kitty, right? That's where they both grew up. My dad came back to Guyana a little over a decade ago, and he has been stationed in Kitty. So this opportunity to help EY build the consulting, but it's bigger than just EY and building that consulting. It's really a chance to give back to Guyana. So if you think about it, when my parents were coming through, you had the conversations of the independence and the oil and all those things that were under those initial leadership. So to be able to have a hand to influence something that they saw as a childhood is really an amazing role for me to have.
Finally, Ms. Alves, what are your aspirations for Guyana? Where do you think its oil and gas industry can go, should go? What kind of legacy do you hope it will leave?
I honestly believe that Guyana is an amazing case study of how you can bring money making when you think about the oil and gas and sustainability, because one side of the country is where you have like the oil and the natural gas, and then the other side is where you have like the Amazon basin. And really showing that those two things can work together is where I think is an amazing legacy for Guyana to do. The other thing I think, because of the way it's being built, when you think about the supply chain, it's like an intermodal strategy. So Guyana has the waters, and that's what it's known for, but then the building of the air. So you have potential building of the rail, and then you already have the roads, and how you put all of those together so that you have a seamless port. So when you come by water, if you transition to rail, or if you transition to trucks, or if you transition to coming from air, you have an intermodal strategy that I think can be really replicated, or something that you can really be something of a legacy when you think about it. So I think from those two things, it's really around how do you blend the two, because sustainability doesn't have to be at odds. So think about waste management, all those things that are part of sustainability, as well as building a fully intermodal holistic strategy.
Ms. Alves, it has been such a pleasure to have you on our podcast session. We thank you so much for the insights you shared with myself as well as our audience. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
To our audience, we do appreciate having you with us every Sunday. Be sure to join us next week, same time, same place, where we bring you more insights from leaders here and around the world. I'm Kiana Wilberg. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Guyana Energy Perspectives podcast. Listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcast.